Speaking moistly. Speaking moistly. Keep 2 meters apart. Speaking moistly.
Moistly.
Welcome to Speaking Moistly. It is your two hosts, Mark Paralivas and Greg Wycliffe. How are you doing today, Mark?
Very, very good, sir. How are you?
You know, I'm doing about as well as one could do these days. It's super cold in Toronto right now, but you know what? I went for a run the other day out in the cold, which is really, really nice. It's good. It feels good.
I
Lets you
went I
warm
went
up.
skating this morning. The ice rink that is being maintained at the park is all frozen, and my kids
Nice.
wanted to go skating, and I could not tell them no, right?
Mhm.
I mean, what
But
kind of monster says
you
no?
made sure that they were in a bubble, though, right? Like you
Oh,
have a
of course. I
bubble,
mean,
right?
cheapers creepers, they could die out there. Yeah. Like,
Bubble
you know, the
skating.
sumo wrestling suit. No, no,
Yeah.
they're fine. They have I educate my children. They are
Nice.
braver and educated, so they
Good
can
to know.
face the and they were insulated against the cold because it is very cold. You were saying. I'm in my garage and I've got 4 layers on, so it's
Nice.
like I
Nice.
look bigger than I am.
Yeah,
But
it's the season where slippers are a necessity. Having those
indeed.
slippers when you're inside. You know how us Canadians be, but if you guys are interested in a kiddie bubble for skating, there's a link down in the description below to keep your kids safe. Just kidding, of course. But I'm just I'm
Do
just
it, man. Do it.
I say all this though because like a friend of mine was like, you know, getting their rapid test done, and like
That's a weird thing.
there's all these packages, there's all this plastic everywhere, and it's like, damn. I don't know, all these products, right? Like it's just like while all this is going on, it's like, man, some certain small groups of companies are printing money right
Ooh,
now.
the
They are
thing
just
to
printing money.
the strange thing to me, if I'm feeling a little sick and there's, an Omicron variant and I'm afraid of this Omicron variant, if I'm like, ooh, my
Never.
throat's a little hurting, the last thing I want to do is line up in a lineup with a whole bunch of other people who have the COVID symptoms waiting for a rapid test. If I
That's where
didn't
you're
have,
wrong. That's where you're wrong. You have to do that to stay safe. Actually, you
oh,
see,
right, for sure.
health science has changed in
I there
since
was a
2020.
reporter who I don't know if he's still in Guelph, but there was a reporter and he's on my Twitter. I thought he left Guelph, but anyway, he was saying I'm lined up to get a rapid test this morning. There's hundreds of people here lined up too, blah blah blah. And I said, testing healthy people for an illness that they may or may not have, that may or may not put them in the hospital, seems like an expensive waste of money and bad policy. What do we gain? And he
Mhm.
never responded. And like other people
Of course not.
responded. Other people were, well, of course not, right? But other people responded and they were like, yeah, good point. What do we gain? I'm like, there's no when did we test? Oh no, Greg, stop. You might have the flu. Go to the pharmacy and get a test. Shouldn't I just go to bed? No, go stand in line at the pharmacy, probably outside for hours to get a test.
In the
Does
dead
this
of winter, by the way, in the dead of winter, do that. Yeah,
does this make any
yeah.
sense? It's an insane thing to ask a public to do. Like it's an
Mhm.
insane ask from the government. It's an insane get some chicken soup, go to bed, feel better,
Yeah.
let your employer know, and then go back to work when you're better. Done. Like
Yeah,
this didn't used to be complicated.
exactly. And when I talk to a lot of people who are all, you know, not rightfully so, but understandably so, they're panicking or they're worried about everything that's going on. Or what do I do? Oh, do I get tested? Oh my God. Usually I just tell them, you know, what would you have done in 2019 before all this? And like you
Yeah.
said, it's like stay home, chicken soup, take care of yourself,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
do some vitamins or something like
Well,
this. But
I remember when
go ahead.
I used to work for schools and my job was a really specialized job. So working with specific students, it's difficult to have stand-ins. So I would go if I was a little bit sick. And I remember one day I got to work, like I got up and I showered and I was like, usually you don't take a break sitting on the bathtub between like brushing your teeth and showering, right? But I was like, this is terrible. And I got to work and my boss was like, she saw me. And before I even got to go see the students, thank goodness, she's like, whoa, 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 what's wrong with you? And I said, what? She said, you look terrible. She's like, go back to bed, go home, go back to bed right now. So my boss sent me home. And like, but a lot of people before 2018 or before 2020, whenever this whole thing happened, would have pushed through illness, would have been like, you know what? I'll expose you to my germs so as not to be judged for calling in sick and saving these sick days for mental health days when I'm not actually sick, but need it to go to Canada's Wonderland.
Yeah,
for
yeah,
example.
and that's just one example of perceptions of things that have totally been distorted and
Oh,
perverted now.
yeah.
Because I was it was actually my mom who was kind of reminiscing with the family over the holidays, and they're like, I remember one Christmas where this flu bug went through all of us, and we were all like
Hmm.
puking everywhere, like one at a time, and it went through all of us, and it was like, oh crap, like they're sick, now they're sick, now they're sick.
Yeah.
And the thing is like, it wasn't like the symptoms were more extreme than the average Omicron, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well,
It's
there
like,
you go.
puking
Well,
everywhere, like, like
yeah.
chills, all that
And
stuff.
do you
and
remember
and we
hating your relatives for it? Were you like those
this is the thing,
evil
right?
people?
This is the
Right?
thing. Getting sick was a very sort of just part of life.
Did you find out
And
who had had their flu shots and
oh
who
my
hadn't had their
God,
flu shots? And you
isn't
were
it
gonna like, listen,
crazy?
go
It's
to the
crazy
garage.
now.
That's where
It's
you live
crazy
now.
now.
That's where you live. You have to
Yeah.
be isolated. We'll
Yeah.
put a bed out there. It's fine.
Oh, what's that, little boy? You have the sniffles? Yeah, we're locking you in your room.
Go to your room
Uh
for 2 weeks.
Now they never enforced that
Like
in
how?
Peel Region.
Because
Didn't
the
didn't
public
didn't Peel Region, Mississauga
healthy.
wanna like suggest that to happen? And they're like, oh, okay, I guess we can't tell you to lock your kid in your room for 2 weeks. Maybe that's
They didn't even really walk it back. Like they just kind of I think they even doubled down on it. They were like, yeah,
that's
you should
gross.
still isolate your kids.
That's
Like Byron Bridle is
that's
like, no, this is insane.
that's
Um,
crazy. All
what's our
right.
first topic, man? I keep
Yep,
sorry,
yeah,
we're off
that's okay. We're
tangent here.
we're catching up. We got three
Yeah,
topics
it's been
today.
a
We're going to
while.
be talking about hospital staffing shortages. We're going to be talking about changing the definition of fully jabbed. Shocker. No one saw that coming. And then of course we'll start now with Quebec is thinking of charging the unvaxxed for healthcare. This is
Yeah, it
from
goes.
This is from Marique Walsh. I don't know if I got her name right, but Quebec Premier François Legault says the province will start charging people who refuse a COVID-19 jab an additional fee for healthcare. He says the exact amount hasn't yet been decided. He says the charge won't apply to people with valid medical exemptions. Okay, so
Yeah,
once again,
well,
those
thank
exemptions are
goodness.
looking are a free ticket once again. Jeez.
Yeah, those, I mean, jeepers creepers. I think that it's interesting because I've been taking it to the next level. Like if the the unvaccinated are responsible for this, like what is the final solution when all is said and done? Are they just going to lock unvaccinated people in a concentration camp until they die? You know, for the next 80 years, for the next until they decide that the case numbers are enough that they can be let out. I'd like what's the plan here?
Yeah, and it's guys, it's pattern recognition. If we've noticed a pattern over the past 2 years, they will present a certain idea, and all of people like us, conspiracy theorists, call it what you want, and we'll be like, oh, this is going to go
Truth
to
seekers.
this is going to go to passports. Eventually, this will go to
Oh,
passports,
eventually,
and like,
like next
hey,
month,
I'm
eventually.
I'm betting this is going to go to passports.
Yes.
People are like, you're crazy. That would never happen. That's insane. And then 6 to 9 months later, it's like, oh yeah, no, that's sound policy. So when we warn like, oh, they're going to ban unjabbed people from the hospital, that does not really seem that far off at this point.
No,
They got
especially when
they got close to giving the option to grocery stores to banning unjabbed people in the New Brunswick, and it hasn't been that long, folks.
Yeah.
It has not been that long.
Well, they just banned the unjabbed from pot shops and sack. Right now, you can still get liquor. Right, if you want your beer and your wine, you can get that from the grocery store.
And
But
and the disgusting thing about it is, and they've even kind of said this in their policy making and their reasoning, is it's to get more people jabbed. Does the jab work?
Mhm.
Well,
It doesn't.
we want to get more people jabbed. Okay, that is the most
That's the
important
goal.
thing.
Right. And
is
it's
to
very
get-
interesting because it follows a similar pattern. Like instead of talking about the whole problem, we've got the people focused on a very small sub problem that like that sub problem is supposed to speak to the broader one, right? A bad example is carbon, right? Like, oh, we've got to reduce the CO2 in the atmosphere, so we're going to reduce the carbon. And rather than talking about the macro, does this solution actually work?
Yeah.
Does this actually
term? What's the long
yeah,
term look like?
5 years, 10 years? How long? And maybe also what's the price tag? Is this an impossible spend, right? What's the price tag? $28 trillion. Well, then I guess we're not doing it, kids. Like
it's what's crazy about this specific one in Quebec is it seems so arbitrary. It's like, hold on, you're just going to present this idea that you can just charge somebody all of a sudden for just because of a certain, like, medical status in your opinion. It's like,
There's an emergency, and so we're going to lock you in your homes for 2 weeks.
like one thing is, okay, maybe you need a very specific procedure done. And that happens in Canada a lot, actually. If you need a specific procedure done, oops, it's not free healthcare anymore. You actually need to pay money for that.
What if the goal is just to decrease the population by 5%, by an additional 5%? What if it's that maniacal? And by doing this, by breaking it this much, it results in, about that much of a loss. So you say, what about the people who need this surgery? Yeah, they're going to get their surgery, but there are going to be people who don't get their surgery in time and they die. That wouldn't have happened if we had the healthcare system that we had in 2018, right? That wouldn't, these things wouldn't be happening because we're stifling. We can talk about the staffing if you want to get into that, maybe. We're stifling our own staffing by these bad policies. It's a lot of, you've been exposed to COVID, so now you have to isolate. And oh, by the way, this other employee are unvaccinated, and so you can't come to work because bad policy. It's created by bad. They say COVID. It's not. They say the COOF. It's not that. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with bad policy, right? They're trying to blame.
You were talking about depopulation or something like that. That seems like a crazy proposition. I just put up a picture of Bill Gates on screen for people. But you were saying
depopulation. Yeah, man. But is it that simple? And like, the funny thing is, like, if you are at a situation where you can't recognize the pattern, how could you recognize a pattern like that right now? Because if you did recognize a pattern like that, you would be ridiculed. Your reputation would be destroyed. The press might talk about how dumb you are. Other people would be encouraged to correct your thinking, et cetera, et cetera. It's not like we live in a post-apocalyptic world that would engineer depopulation or anything like that.
Yeah.
That's sci-fi.
And just so you know, guys, don't worry. I have routers right here. Fact check Bill Gates quote about jabs and population growth. That's been taken out of context.
Yeah.
Okay. That's been taken out of context.
He did say it. Well, can you put it in context? Because I can if you want to, but
I'm being facetious or sarcastic.
Well, but it does matter because
absolutely it matters.
Like I did watch the TED Talk, and the whole idea is that you lose fewer kids, blah blah blah, and so if you keep more kids, if you have more kids and don't lose them in early childhood, then you don't have as many kids or don't have the need to have as many kids. But making a continent richer, like making the people who live there have more money, generally has resulted in fewer children through, in the UK and the US, et cetera, et cetera. So what Gates is proposing to do through vaccination could be done just by making people richer, right? Like, and it's just an interesting thing, right? So anyway, and I'm probably missing. I haven't watched it in more than a decade. No, I watched it when it first came out.
Yeah, and it is too bad because for those watching, we are on YouTube, and me and Mark recognize that, so we kind of have to bite our tongues a little bit because freedom, is it real anymore? I don't know. But let's go on to the next topic, which staffing. Is changing the definition.
Oh, it's not staffing.
No, it's changing the definition of being fully jabbed. Before it was 2 doses, and now it's 3. So now if you don't have 3, you're going to be an anti-vaxxer real quick if you don't.
Well, even if you have questions about number 3, sir, you've already taken 2. Why would you question this now? Absolutely. you're already down the garden path, right? So even having questions about this is the course of treatment. This is the direction Canada is going. And if you're not on board, if you're not with us, you're against us. Isn't that George Bush? Did George Bush say that?
Yeah. And I think an interesting topic to segue into, because we have the tweet up here from Ryan O'Connor, TV doctor now lobbying to change the reporting definition of not fully jabbed to include the vast majority of adult Ontarians who have not received a 3rd dose of a 2-dose jab. This is Michael Warner categorizing COVID ICU patients as fully jabbed 2 weeks post-shot 2 is a legacy definition, less applicable with Omicron.
Yep.
Ontario government should
There's a
update
new
reporting
variant.
to be consistent with what we see at the bedside, i.e., 3 shots almost never need ICU unless immunocompromised, e.g., post transplant. I wanted to bring up the interesting sort of role that these TV doctors play, and I think that's a really that's like a phrase that's kind of been getting more popular. These TV doctors.
Yep.
And the thing is you don't really need to explain it to people
No.
because people have been watching TV and they've been seeing the same doctors. There's only
Mhm.
like, there's 5 in the States, there's
How
2
well?
or 3 here.
How many times, just ballpark, does the healthcare system need to collapse to the point where it you need to lock down the population in order to save the healthcare system
Mm,
before you change the people who are in charge of the public health? Because it
mm,
seems like, like it seems like there's a really big problem. Either the bureaucrats who are responsible for maintaining the beds or the people creating the policy don't understand the real world impact of their
mm,
policy
yeah.
or whatever. But I mean, like, how many in a war, if you had a general who
Mm,
kept wasting resources and setting you back and doing stupid things like saying something definitely won't work, like masking or closing borders, and then mandating masks and closing borders, it seems like at some point you'd fire the inept people who keep screwing up. But in Canada, has one person been fired? I mean, there has been people who are no longer doing the job, but that's not widely talked about,
yeah.
right?
So the thing is that you're missing, Mark, is
Mm.
everything that's gone wrong can be blamed on people like you and me who have not yet got our shots.
Obviously,
Everything.
clearly it's our
Everything.
fault.
If you
Mhm.
lost your job, if you stubbed your toe,
Mhm.
definitely if you have a tickle in the back of your throat,
Yeah,
that is
anti-vaxxers.
our fault.
That's, yeah, for
It's
sure.
all our fault. And there's certainly a lot of psychological implications though of how well that's actually worked, with people actually believing that. And obviously there's a lot of people on TV and the news and the TV
The
doctors
thing
saying,
is,
"Oh, it was the
the thing is,
unjabbed," but
Canadians just want to be left alone. And they don't realize that in their quest to want to be left alone, they are ceding so much ground that being left alone is an impossibility
mhm,
because they want everything, right?
yeah.
And so, we are in a situation where if we don't start engaging with what's actually being put on the table, right, like they're not stopping. Legault's talking about removing healthcare from tax-paying citizens who haven't complied with an illegal order that we get uh, a therapeutic, a healthcare therapeutic, like not a vaccine, because a vaccine would have to have a specific level of efficacy to be approved, right? This is a therapeutic that wanes. That there's a lot of things out there that there's a lot of evidence out there that says the direction we're going is wrong, and yet nobody's allowed to even question it. And now they're trying to strip people of even more rights. And the longer we hide, I guess, from it, the less standing we're going to have when there's nowhere to hide.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, I don't know if it was Lauren Chen who originally said this or if she was quoting somebody else, but it's probably somebody else originally. But essentially, the quote is, you know, you may not care about politics, but politics cares about you. And in our current time, current contemporary era, it's like, politics is coming for you. It's coming for you. And so, like you were saying, Canadians just want to be left alone. It's like, well, that's not actually, that's not going to work out for you because it's your passivity and these apolitical people as well. These people who,
They're not
where
apolitical though.
well,
They
no,
like to
but
pretend they are, but
they
they're
don't
not.
realize that, and that's what I think is so interesting about centrists and about people who don't want to pick a side. And there's so much to this, I think, Mark. Like there's people
Mm,
who are like, oh well, transgenderism, they're just living their lives. What does that have to do with politics? And like
hmm.
then this is like so many people in the mushy middle who think that it has nothing to do with anything else. It's like, well, obliterating like man meaning man and female meaning female, like that has a lot of implications if
Yep.
we as a society are just going to believe that like up is down and down is up and it can be whatever we want.
Yeah.
uh
Yep.
it's like and they're like, oh well, that's not political, I don't see why, and they there's so much culture around being apolitical or being apathetic, and
Canadians are encouraged to, and they're encouraged to be
mhm,
activists for the things that you were just talking about: transgenderism,
mhm,
rainbowism, LGBTQism,
you're right.
all of that stuff. They're very
And it's all
incentivized.
right. And it's almost to them, it's, oh, well, that's not political. That's just being a good person. Like
Yes.
politics is just like, policy about taxes. Like that's all it is. It's just like tax policy and
And
voting for
yeah,
people with policy. Meh, meh, meh. And it's no, there's people wielding ideologies and shoehorning it into everything. And there's
yes.
grave implications of that
Mhm.
because, well, now we live in this weird touchy feely world where it's all about my feelings and political
Well,
correctness,
but
and
well,
it's just hard to have an honest conversation anymore when you have
yeah,
the opposition who's always saying, well, you're a bad person, well, you racist, you're a bad person,
but
I'm not going to debate you on anything, you're wrong because you're bad, by the way,
yeah, yeah,
the rules don't apply to me because I'm Jagmeet Singh or Justin Trudeau, and that's just the way it is.
yeah. Well, Bob Saget died. You remember that, or you heard about that?
I did hear about that. Rest in peace, Bob Saget.
And you have no idea where I'm going with this, but I promise you it'll make sense.
I might.
And yesterday I saw a tweet saying like, why can't what happened to this America, right? The Bob Saget era,
Mm.
1990s America.
Like the
And
Full House
I
America.
just played I played the Full House theme song. Right, that one. Um,
Dun, dun, dun,
bow,
dun, dun,
bow.
dun,
Yeah. Oh, and here's the
ah,
San
dun,
Francisco
dun,
version.
dun, dun,
Um,
dun. Yeah.
so and like the whole intro was, it was wholesome as all get out because, and I mean that was part of the joke. I mean it was so wholesome, it was almost like
Sickening.
sickly sweet.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was San Francisco, and like now San Francisco, you've got a slow roll through San Francisco and you've got like crackheads like beside people, masked fearful people
Yeah.
standing to waiting in line to get into a store or something like that. And that's, or maybe not, right? Maybe the store's boarded up, right? And so like, when did that sickly sweet ideal become something that was uh white supremacy racism, right? Like that's the
Mm,
line they're trying to draw.
interesting.
If you want this, you're terrible. And it's like, I disagree. I think that that was a high watermark. And anybody paying attention, I hope you all enjoyed it. the
Yeah.
the smartphones didn't usher in better,
Hmm.
right? Candy Crush is not your savior.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like it's more and more I'm realizing a lot of like the issues that we're facing today aren't really anything new. It's just like a new iteration
Yes, it's
for
all the
our
same
time
lie.
period.
It's all
And
the same lie.
a lot of it is just people tearing down something that exists with no suggestion of an alternative. That's what
Yes.
always bothers me. It's like, oh well, math is racist.
Uh,
This
oh
is
yeah.
all white supremacy, and it's like, well,
Yep.
what's the alternative that you're suggesting exactly?
How do we fix this exactly? Yeah, exactly.
And it's always like, well, go back to caves. And like that sounds extreme, but like when it comes to green energy
Yep.
specifically, it's like,
It
what are
doesn't
you
work.
suggesting exactly? Like
Yeah.
we all live
Doesn't.
in squalor where we can't, like, we don't have electricity anymore, and
Yes.
like we can't have grocery stores functioning or like fully, stocked
That's already
shelves
happening.
because,
That
well,
doesn't. We
yeah,
don't even need. Like.
there's, we don't have this on the topics today, but like the whole, they're about to come down on truckers really soon, and it
Yeah.
sounds like that's going to be
Yep.
brutal.
Yep.
That's going to be, that's going to affect you.
Yes.
But
Probably.
of course,
Yeah.
no news about it in the CTV probably, or I doubt it.
No.
Anyway,
No. I know people's covering it.
let's get to hospital shortages here. Our final
Yeah.
topic.
Staffing.
The urgent care center at Peel Memorial Center for Integrated Health and Wellness in Brampton will be closed until at least February 1st amid, quote, extreme capacity and staffing shortages. What do you think, Mark?
These are self-inflicted wounds, and I covered this a little bit on my show this morning too. But these are all staffing because of stupid policy issues, stupid policy decisions, bad policy at the federal level, fear mongering at the media level, bad policy at the provincial level, the bureaucracy at the hospital level. Like what? And I said before, what job could you do? Can you fail? What lockdown are we on now? 5, 6, 9, 10? What are we?
I think 4 technically in Ontario, but
Yeah. So how many professions do you get to like completely lock down an entire population of a province because oops, sorry guys, we heard about this incoming pandemic, and you know what we did? We fired healthcare workers who told us to shove our vaccine up our ass. Right. Yeah. So I mean, no, guys, I blame the bureaucrats. I blame the people who squarely hold responsibility for this. And I can't believe that there hasn't been one person fired. Where are the firings? Who is going to fix this? Right. Nobody's on deck to be like, the way out of this mess is everybody's like, safety requires that everybody wear this helmet and take these chemotherapy drugs. You might get cancer at some point in your life. So you need to take these drugs forever.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a pretty common theme, I would say, since the beginning of this. I want to watch his content again, but I think his name was like something Redman, and he's this guy who worked in like emergency services,
emergency
in Alberta.
management.
Yeah, emergency
He
management.
was a former Canadian Forces guy too. Yeah, he was very experienced, very well.
Yeah. He deserves recognition. Shout outs to Mr. Redman. Maybe we'll cover that in another show. But my point, like his kind of main point, or like something that I took away from his presentation from like a year ago, was our approach to this whole thing has been so siloed into public health. Like public health is the only thing.
Unilateral power.
Yeah, and like they have authority over everything now. It's like, well, public health this, public health that, and even within public health, it's like, oh, are there different approaches to this? Is there different ways we can be looking at this and breaking down the different problems we're facing? No. There's a silo within the silo, and that is, are you getting this medical procedure done or not? Like that is the only thing that matters. Oh, now this is the only procedure you need if you want to get the rest of them, actually.
Yeah, and it's a good way to too, because any of vaccine adverse events, they're not in that silo. The medical people who are pushing this stuff, it's a one-way. Yeah,
Mark, that data? No, that's bad data. We don't look at that data.
They don't talk about it. And I mean, like liberals, they don't answer questions they don't like. But it is very interesting because like they are mouthpieces one way. They set policy, they fix policy to make sure people that found loopholes are caught up within the policy. And this is a clock game now, right? Like over a long enough period of time, everybody is going to become eligible and excluded from society because people who are unvaxxed are now currently excluded from society. You can't play organized sports. You can't, there's all sorts of things you can't do. And so, it's just a matter of time before everybody is taken up by that.
And then a great question is, do you ever think you're going to be compliant enough?
Right.
Do these people actually think that,
shots,
once I get my booster, then they will stop bothering me? Like, are you serious? Like how? I don't know. There's not much going on upstairs for these people.
But
like one thing is thinking that it's going to help you, but another is thinking like, then it's going to be over. Then it'll be all over, and the government will stop bothering me. And it's like, you really think that's going to happen? Okay.
Here's an uncomfortable truth. Your life, my life, our Canadian lives, the life we thought we were going to be leading in 2022 is gone. And we've lost control of being able to plan how it's going to go. If you plan to open a business in June, really? How's that going to go? If you plan to open a business next year, really? You plan to buy a house next year, really? You got $1 million? Okay. I mean, good luck, right? So your life as you knew it prior to 2020, prior to the mismanagement of Justin Trudeau and his cronies who were in charge, prior to the idiotic lockdowns, prior to all the destruction, the life that we were living is decimated. And I'm not trying to be demoralizing. I'm trying to orient people. And the only way to take control of what happens next is to take yourself out of the situation that is destabilizing everyone. And the situation that's destabilizing everyone is our government at this point in time. And I don't know that there's a better place to be. If I knew of the better place to be, I think I'd be making moves to get there because I don't know where the better place to be is. But fundamentally, if you don't want your life to be at the whim of the Ontario government, if you live in Ontario, or the Alberta government, if you live in Alberta, then removing yourself from as much of their control within your own life as possible is like something you can do, I suppose. But is that good? Is that beneficial? And like, if you want to do that, does your family? You know what I mean? If you have kids, do your kids? Is that the best thing for them? Right. So there's so many aspects to it that you get, we talk about having to realize that we have to fight back, but people have lives and they have wives and husbands and kids who want to live in the world that we're currently inhabiting, and they don't want to fight a war, right? And as a parent, you don't want your kids to have to fight, your elementary school kids to have to fight about whatever at every step, right? Like, so, and that's just one example, right? So it's very insidious. Like I saw a tweet, I almost sent it to you. It was talking about like the woke, they were exporting wokeism, America exporting wokeism to the rest of the world. And it was being used as a weapon, right? Like this ideological thing. And yeah, I think that that's exactly what's happening, right? Like, I don't think that, I think that this is a mind virus, right? To use a lack of a better term, the ideas contained herein are so addictive to people in power, and the people who are being ruled over seem to like the restrictions. And it's like, how do you put a stop to this? How do you end this? Right? How do you break people out of a prison they kind of like? How do you end rulers who are being positively reinforced the more tyrannical they get? Right? The public polling goes up, the more restrictive they get. And it's like, how do you stop that? Right? It's a positive or negative feedback loop, but it's an increasing feedback loop.
Yeah. You a lot to say there, but
sorry.
No, it's all right. Gad Saad did a book called The Parasitic Mind, and he talks about the mind virus of wokeism. Great book. I highly recommend it. It's quite witty and informative, and he talks about the many ways and how wokeism is not only attractive, but how it kind of seems to be like people. Anyway, I won't go into detail there, but you pretty much nailed it. And I think the answer to people watching is to really kind of really try to focus on your own sort of peace of mind, right? Like, and connect with people in your life. I've personally been, networking with people locally and across the country who are sane, who aren't kind of participating in this. And there's a lot to focus on that you can control. And I think that's the main key here, because making people go insane, making people feel demoralized, like this is part of the game, and we can't allow ourselves we can't allow ourselves to despair, as hard as that may be. But that's been great. You can reach us at speakingmoistly.co. You can reach us on Twitter at GDub and Mark Peralvis down below here. Any final words, Mark?
No, man, I think, well, I say no, and then I'll get into these final words. Sure. Yeah, I'll have some final words. I think that, what we're living through is just incredibly outside of what most people expected to be living through. And most people weren't prepared or aren't prepared to take care of their mental health, or take care of their setting their own goals, doing things that are small, like manageable goals, because that develops good feelings in you, right? Like if you think to yourself, I want to put together a 2-minute, talking at the screen video, and then you do it and you're like, oh, I feel good about doing that. Right. Like, but a lot of people set goals that are like, I want to climb Mount Everest. And it's like, well, maybe aim lower and get some successes. Right. But the best way to learn how to do something is to just try it and then reassess. But a lot of people, it takes a long time to reassess. So try setting your own goals and shrinking your feedback to what do you think about it, right? Like, if you could do it different, how would you do it different? And then do it different and iterate, change, and make progress. And then your progress along that line will benefit you and hopefully the community as well. Anyway, that was a long final thought. You can find me at all the places Greg said. Thanks for watching, everybody.
We'll have the government play us out.
Justin Trudeau.
Keep 2 meters apart, speaking moistly.